Welcome to the Heroes of Reality podcast, a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, young adventurers. Dylan here, and on today's podcast, I have Giuseppe Riva, Ph.D., a full professor of general and cognitive psychology at the Catholic University in Milan, Italy, where he is also the director of Human Technology Lab, the HTLab. Riva is also the founder and director of the Applied Technology for Neuropsychology at the Istituto Lexico Italiano. I probably butchered that, so I apologize. Where in the last 20 years, he's tested many of the current clinical applications of VR, from stress management to eating and weight loss disorders. In the lab, he has also offered the COVID Feel Good Virtual Therapeutics Experience, covidfeelgood.com, the only free, validated, and multilingual 13 different languages from English to Farsi to Japanese VR experience for coping with the negative psychological effects of anxiety and depression of coronavirus. So without any delay, I would like to welcome Giuseppe Riva.
Ciao from Italy.
Ciao, brother. It's so good to see you. I'm so excited to talk with you today. How you doing today?
Oh, fine. Now in Italy it's 9 p.m., so it's a little late. You see the sky is dark now.
Okay. Technically it's dark. It's dark all around me, but that is only through my own augmented reality. Man, there was and I think it was 2015. You were at the Behavioral Change Conference over at Stanford, correct?
Yeah.
I remember seeing you speak back then, and you were one of three dudes that I saw that I was like, okay, this guy is actually truly deep diving into how to use virtual reality for change, for physical change, psychological change, and all of that. And I was so excited to finally get you on the podcast here. I would love to just kind of learn just a little bit about your origin stories of what actually got you into combining both psychological change and virtual reality technologies together as one. So how did you get into the space?
Well, it's a long story. I was very young at that time. It was 1994. I was completing my Ph.D. in psychology, and I was facing an interesting issue. I have a friend, a girl, who had problem with body image. She was anorectic at the time, and I was very surprised by the fact that she was a very intelligent lady, very smart, but she experienced her body as a real pain. And even if I can discuss with her and she agreed on something I tried to explain to her, well, she was not able to modify her experience of the body. At that time, I tried for the first time the commercial virtual reality experience in London, and it was it provided me a great insight. I discovered that virtual reality was able to modify my experience of the body. That before I expected to be my real own experience. The body is something that you can touch, you can experience, you can feel, and you don't consider it as the product of simulation. You feel something real. However, entering virtual reality, I experienced a change in the way I feel myself. And I said, well, this experience is so powerful that if we can understand how to use it for improving people, probably we have a very powerful tool for change. And since then, I try to understand. I am a cognitive psychologist, so I have two souls. On one side, I work in a hospital trying to find solution for treating people with many different diseases. On the other side, I'm a basic scientist, so I do a lot of lab work in order to understand what is happening when you try virtual reality. And putting them together, I discovered that virtual reality is very powerful in modifying our intuitive experience. According to cognitive psychology, we have two different parts of our brain: a rational one that is based on thinking, and intuitive one that is based on simulation. This intuitive one is the most difficult to change. You can work on the rational level. Sometimes you know that you have to change, but when you try to change yourself, you find many block road that stops you in some way. So the idea is that virtual reality is the key for modifying your intuitive level, and through the change of our intuitive level, we can really go deep in our brain and make things that otherwise are not possible.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, so you had an experience. The experience of virtual reality in London changed your perception because you realized you had not only an attachment to yourself, but you felt almost had like a fundamentally deeper and different attachment using virtual reality to in tune with yourself.
That's right. Yes.
And then so from that, you realize that we have a couple different brains. One brain being the fact that we're logical, we're fact-based. We have that. And then we have the intuitive feeling sensations, but also your ability, which sounds like you're also talking about mental models, the ability to create simulations in your mind. The only thing is sometimes we have these blocks. We have these things that don't allow us to change. Now that could be identity or ego or other things that prevent us. And you feel that virtual reality really gives you the ability to overcome your own internal blocks inside of you. Is that kind of a summation of what you just mentioned?
That's right. One of the features of our intuitive brain is that it's automatic. So it works without your control. When the intuitive part starts, you cannot stop it. I don't know, for instance, you can have craving. You have the urge of eating, of playing, of something. And when you have this urge, it's something that you cannot control. It's automatic. It drives you crazy because you want to eat, you want to play, you want to do something. And stopping these automatic behaviors is very difficult. And typically in addiction, this is the main problem. These automatic behaviors are driven by simulation. So the idea that your brain predicts in advance the end. So the brain predicts that when you will see a specific stimuli, you will go till the end. And changing this simulation is very difficult unless you don't use another simulation. This is why virtual reality has been used, for instance, in dealing with anxiety or in dealing with addiction, because in some way you can modify this automatic process and reprogram itself in a way that is not dangerous anymore. Just to make it more clear for our audience, you have in a typical eating disorder is bulimia. You have the urge of eating, and then you have vomiting at the end. In this mechanism, there is something such as an emotional event or the view of a food that starts this automatic process. However, using virtual reality, you can construct the same situation and try to make the individual aware of this process and reduce the impact of the negative emotion. Negative emotions decrease the intensity the more we experience a given stimuli. So if I have a fear of dog, the first time I see the dog, I have a strong fear. The 10th time I see the same dog, my fear decreases. So with virtual reality, you can make our brain adapt to the specific stimuli, to the fearful stimuli, and in this way you break the automatic link between stimuli and emotion, stimuli and behavior. And this is very powerful, and you cannot do that in another way.
Yeah.
So,
That's super interesting. So I want to reflect back just a little bit on what you're talking about here. So stimulation is the first step for your mental model to create a simulation in your mind, which kind of takes you all the way through to the end process, which there's emotions and there's no pathways and there's things that say, okay, smell a donut. Oh my God, I want the donut. And then you picture eating the donut, you want a donut, and then this cravings kind of almost without your control puts you on the path. And the value of what virtual reality can do, it can recreate those environments and bring those patterns to the surface. And then once you become aware of that pattern, you can kind of desensitize yourself to that pathway because you're aware, and then you can actively choose new pathways so that when you get stimulated again, you have now a new simulation in your mind to go down with the assistance of virtual reality. Is that
That's right. It is the same concept also used by mindfulness, another very popular process of dealing with our brain. In mindfulness, you try to be aware of this automatic behavior. So the mindfulness is trying to focus your attention on what you do, including automatic behavior, because the more you are aware of your automatic behaviors, the easier you can control themselves. Mm-hmm. And mindfulness is difficult. If you try mindfulness, you need to be very, very focused. Virtual reality is much easier because you can construct the environment, the stimuli, in order to make to reach your goal. So you try to meet what the brain expects, and this is much easier. In mindfulness, you have to focus on your flow of thought, and it's difficult to control it. With virtual reality, you can split the process in many small experience blocks that you can change one after another. And this is very, very powerful.
That's awesome. So it's almost like virtual reality is almost like training wheels for your mental model. And it allows you a way to kind of outsource your mindfulness in an environment it puts you in the environment so that it creates more of a solid virtual reality versus your mind. You could be concentrating on it, and then you can get easily distracted. You can get knocked off of it. So it's really hard to kind of stay in that pocket and go through it. But if you have virtual reality, you kind of it creates the environment around you, and so it's a container for you to kind of explore that mental model activity you have. So it seems like training wheels for mindfulness is almost what I'm hearing you say.
That's true. The real problem in mindfulness is keeping attention on your flow of thinking, and this flow is always changing, and you try to keep on track, but everything's changed around you. In virtual reality, you have this environment that is developed for make you focus on a single experience, a single piece of the overall experience. So you don't have distraction, and it's much, much easier.
Mm-hmm. So then let me ask you, what are a couple of the main ones that you've seen that have had the most impact using VR? What are the ones that you find to be the most beneficial situations or environments or addictions or things that come up that VR has the biggest impact for?
Well, for sure, any emotional issue. I think that all the form of anxiety disorders that in which you have this basic mechanism, you have a stimulus, then you have an automatic response at the end. This kind of situation can produce a lot of change through virtual reality. So any form of anxiety disorders can have a big boost through the process of virtual reality. But also, I think that the next frontier will be degenerative disease. I think that virtual reality can also provide a lot of insights and probably solution for slow down many cognitive diseases such as Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's. So in this sense, I think that virtual reality can be very, very powerful on the clinical side, even if there are still many problems who have prevented virtual reality to be really used inside the clinical world. In Europe, probably there are only one out of 100 clinics that are experiencing daily virtual reality treatment. It is just a small fraction of the overall impact that we can achieve through virtual reality.
Wow. So you're saying 1 out of 100 clinics use VR at most, kind of thing, and so there's an opportunity to really step. It's just the early dawn age of virtual reality being used in the clinical setting. One thing you're talking about Parkinson's, I've actually seen. So I was a judge, lead judge over at the Creating Reality Hackathon over at USC, University of Southern California. And one of the, have you seen the application that came out of there? Because I was a judge for it, and one of the
Skip Ritz is a long-time friend, and they have created most of the US application used in research. So I think that their work has been really important. However, their work is mostly research work. So they work more on research, and the critical side is moving virtual reality from research, from the labs to the clinic. And this is a big challenge because still we don't have any VR course inside psychology faculty, or very small. In my university, I have had a course on that, but in most of the psychology clinical university in Europe, you don't have a specific course telling you how to use virtual reality and what is the potential of this technology for the clinical world.
Yeah, and Skip has done a lot of work over at USC for sure. I know him. I know him pretty well. I was actually referencing a different group of people at the hackathon. You know, like a hackathon where people get together and they build stuff. So one of the groups of engineers, they took shaky camera stability, the shaky cam, and they put it inside a controller. So for people with Parkinson's, it would normify the hand so that they could then draw or have a higher quality of life as they're drawing inside there. And then they were doing training inside VR for Parkinson's, and same thing like phantom limb syndrome. They were using that to train the mental model inside there. Have you seen that at all? Have you seen that been used in the clinical settings at all?
There are some attempts because the real problem of the technology created in hackathon is that typically they don't have the requirements that are needed by the clinical work. For instance, to be used in a clinic, a device has to be a medical device. This means in the US that you have to obtain an FDA approval. In Europe, you have a medical device approval from a central institution. This means that even if the concept works quite well, you have to prove it through clinical work. And this side is the big problem, because even if the hackathon outcome is really, really promising, to be used in a clinic, you have to be sure that it is not harmful for any patient. And this means a lot of money for clinical trials. Now, the big barrier for using VR effectively is like a new drug. If you want to put a new drug in the market, you have to spend a lot of money for clinical trials. Unfortunately, we have to do the same for many applications of VR. And this is obviously a barrier, because until we have pharmaceutical companies investing in VR, will be very difficult for small companies having the amount of money that testing at a clinical device will require.
Yeah, and there are pharmaceutical companies investing in VR applications to get them you pass the barriers. So I know some of them are using virtual reality for drug design, where you can take the molecules and you can tweak them in doing that, and then through like the blockchain, you can then say ownership. And so I know pharmaceutical companies have been backing companies that I know of that do that. And I know that there was a USC company that just got recently FDA approval for their virtual reality application, which was for breathing in VR. So I've seen that, but you're right. I mean, but isn't it always? I mean, that's not an issue necessarily with virtual reality. That's more of the fact that the medical industry has lots of red barrier tapes to get through. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a challenge of virtual reality, more so of the system.
Well, this is true. I think that there are some barriers because a big challenge that FDA has to face now is that now there is a big growth of the concept of digital therapeutics, and virtual reality obviously is a typical digital therapeutic tool. And digital therapeutics are different from the typical drug. So trying to apply the same process required for a drug to a digital therapeutic probably is a mess. It's something too complicated, and FDA in the last year tried to introduce a speedier process for this kind of digital therapeutic that, in my opinion, can help a lot, because it's obvious that virtual reality is not a drug. Because you don't have this drug in your body. We know very well after 24 years the effects of virtual reality on our body. We know the side effects. We know how to cope with them. So probably we need a different approach. And if this will happen, I'm sure that FDA is working on that. Probably the process will be easier. As you said, in the last year, 2 different US companies were able to obtain FDA approval for their digital therapeutic. And this, I think, is a big boost for other companies in the field, because if this path can be followed by others, probably we will have, in a short term, a lot of different packages that clinical can buy and use. Because the big problem now is that if you're a clinician that is interested in virtual reality and you want to use it in your own clinic or in your own office, in your study, well, the problem is that you don't have many tools to buy. You have to program yourself, but it's clear that it's not a possible solution. Even if we know very well, because now in the last probably 10 years, in scientific literature, we can find more than 1,000 papers justifying the use of virtual reality in many different pathologies.
Yeah. What about in terms of, have there been any solid evidence-based models or psychology practices like behavioral conditioning or any of the other ones that pop up that you see as a really good fit for VR?
Well, I think that cognitive behavioral therapy fits very well with VR, in the sense that the principles of cognitive behavioral therapies can be easily adapted to the characteristic of virtual reality. So in this sense, I think that is not so complex, and now many of the most effective virtual reality devices and protocols available now are based on cognitive behavioral therapy, because cognitive behavioral therapy provides very clear predictions that can be easily tested in VR. I think that the best advantage of virtual reality is that you can test if it works or not. So, for instance, for one of the main principles of cognitive behavioral therapy is the concept of desensitization, that the more you are exposed, the less is the response. And with virtual reality, you can easily test that. You can expose people and check the level of emotional arousal through biosensor, and you can see that the process works. So I think that CBT is probably the most effective model for the use of virtual reality now. Probably we can also do more. I think that in neuroscience now there is an emerging paradigm that is called the predictive coding brain. The idea that our brain is a simulator that tries to predict in advance the outcome of action, of behavior, and the more the prediction is right, the more you are able to face the problems, the perils inside your environment. And this model is quite interesting because it also predicts that when the predictions are wrong, so when our brain is not able to do good prediction, you experience some form of pathology. And in this way, it also suggests that by correcting a wrong prediction, you probably will be able to heal people. And concept is new because this idea of predictive coding appeared in the new century, so about 20 years ago. And so we need more research, but clinically is very, very promising.
Yeah. So, I mean, reflect on that, because I'm familiar with the predictive coding. So if you, what I don't fully understand is the difference between mental models and predictive coding in terms of, like, how do you, so predictive coding is you're making assumptions about, if I smell this donut, I eat the donut, I go through the donut, and then I'm going to feel good about the donut. I want the donut. That is, what is the difference between creating a mental model and predictive coding for the brain?
In predictive coding, the mental models are based on your previous experience. So the more you do an experience before, the more this prediction will be based on your past. So the idea is that the overall concept of mental models means that you have some schema in your brain that drives your behavior. Predictive coding means that this schema is based on your past experience. So if you were not lucky and your past experience were not so happy, this prediction may drive you crazy, because you can think that because the past was not happy for you, the future will be again very, very dark. So predictive coding suggests that the analysis of the experience of the individual is relevant to understand the mental model. So each one mental model is based on his own past, her own past, and this past is not the only possible past. We can have many different pasts. So with virtual reality, you can experience a different past. There is a lot of research that try to make you change your own body. So, for instance, there is a study very interesting made by a colleague, a Spain colleague, Professor Slater, working in the University of Barcelona, in which he tried to put people in the body of Albert Einstein. People who were not good in maths, so people who had problem in maths, entered and experienced the body of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was a genius in math. So what happened when people entered in the body of Albert Einstein, that their cognitive skills, in particular the math skills, improved automatically, because being in the body of a genius make them predict that they will work as a genius. It's like a big placebo effect. We know that the placebo effect, when you think that this pill will be positive for you, the pill will be positive for you. Virtual reality can allow you to create big placebo experiences that can modify your predictions.
So that's interesting. Like, how would you put yourself inside the body of Albert Einstein? So you're in his office. You look down. You see his crazy white hair in the mirror. Or like, it's an interesting. How would you create that effect using virtual reality?
Yes, it's an interesting effect. It's based on the rubber hand illusion. I don't know if you are familiar with this concept. Rubber hand illusion is an experiment in which you hide your real hand and you put a rubber hand in front of you, and you touch at the same time the rubber hand and your real hand. And after some time, seeing the rubber hand touched and experience the real hand touch at the same time makes your brain predict that the real hand is not the one hidden, but the rubber hand that you can see. And the same approach works with Albert Einstein. You have a first-person view in virtual reality of Albert Einstein, and you see in the mirror that someone touches the body of Albert Einstein, and you experience your own body touch at the same time. After 5 minutes of simultaneous touch and view, your brain thinks that your own body is not the real one, but the one you see in virtual reality.
Got it. Yeah. So again, training wheels. You're simulating the experience of Albert Einstein by going through and living a day in his shoes. You're making kinesthetic connections by them touching you, and then you basically create these like false neural pathways to a degree that now you have an association with you being that embodied character of Albert Einstein. That makes a lot of sense. How does narrative therapy coincide with predictive models? If you look at narrative therapy and predictive coding, it sounds like predictive coding creates the mental models. So how does narrative therapy type into predictive coding along the way? Ooh, I got a link from you.
Yeah. This is the experiment of Albert Einstein. So if the audience want to read what happened and check the experiment, I think that could be nice.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's awesome. We can drop that in. I'll throw that across the group. There.
No, yes, that's great. You were asking if in which way the predictive coding mechanism can be used in virtual. Well, I'm trying to use.
No. Specifically, I was asking the question around how does predictive coding and narrative therapy work? So narrative therapy being basically being able to change and alter your own stories. It sounds like predictive coding is just another word for reassigning the meaning behind the past experiences.
Yes, that's true. It is not so different from what you can do with drama therapy, in the sense that you try to re-experience this experience and providing a different meaning. The problem is that you typically use memory to do that, but memory is not so rich, and we know that memory can be difficult to change. Having a real experience allow you to modify memories. So and also modify a wrong prediction. For instance, we are using virtual reality now for dealing with anorexia nervosa. In anorexia nervosa, it's clear that the brain of the anorectic makes a wrong prediction. The prediction is that the body is very fat, but the real body is very, very thin. So there is in my opinion, my view, this morphophobia is created by a wrong prediction of the brain. And the challenge is how we can modify this wrong prediction. And for instance, we used body swapping, the same technique that has been used with Albert Einstein. So we try to put the anorectic girl in the body of, in a different body, to force the brain to change the prediction. Mm-hmm. Because when you do when the brain makes a wrong prediction, it is forced to change the prediction itself in order to be able to include a new experience inside the model, the brain model. So putting the girl inside a different body was able to force the brain to change the mental body, and we have found that this approach can be very, very effective in this situation. So the idea is this one, that you try to change a wrong prediction by creating experiences that cannot be predicted by the brain.
Okay, so what you're saying is with the so predictive coding is what you think is going to happen based upon a stimuli or an event. And so inside virtual reality, you're creating new memories, which is reshaping the predictive coding and saying, when I look in the mirror, I feel this way, right? And that's the coding, right? And then you put them inside virtual reality, and they look inside a virtual mirror, and they see something different, which then forces them to basically alter their predictive coding, because there is now a discrepancy between their mental model and the virtual reality that they see before them, right?
That's right.
So it's interesting. So then if you're doing that, but if you do that, the predictive coding, it sounds like they're creating a new narrative in their own mind. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around, if I expose myself to a mirror in virtual reality and I see myself as skinny, then I have an internal narrative that goes, oh, I must be a skinny person, or insert the new storyline that they get from that experience. Is there a thing where you're inside virtual reality, you get exposed to that experience, and that experience then creates a new narrative, which then shapes your predictions, which then creates a new behavioral change? Is
that's right? This is the path we are testing now in different studies. The idea is that in this way you makes we have this experience of awe, the marvel, in which we know that cognitive science suggests that the experience of awe is a very transformative experience, because after the marvel that makes you say, wow, you are forced to change your predictive coding. And if we are able to create this awe effect using virtual reality, probably we can induce a change, an automatic change that can be then modeled in order to achieve also the behavioral change that you expect. This is the difficult part, so that you have to produce the awe and then try to drive this awe in a different change. Typically in life, the experience of awe are very few. We don't have so many experiences. For instance, the first time I had this experience when I reached a peak in the Alps in Italy, and I was surprised. I was to the top of this mountain. I was looking around. There were no skies. It was a great experience in which I said, "Wow, I am so small, and the world is so big." And this touched me, and this experience suggested me that the experience of going to the mountain is something that can open your heart. Not for everyone is the same, but this experience was strong enough in order to make me reflect and try to modify myself in some way. Well, virtual reality is very powerful in creating awe experience. For instance, in my lab, we try to put individuals in a virtual space. So you were put inside the universe, in the middle of planets, and you floated in the middle. And this, for many students that were involved in this experience, was a very powerful experience, because they felt themselves different. They were floating, they were free, they were small inside this big universe. And for many of them, this experience was something that pushed them to say, wow, I can change. After this experience, I can do different things. And probably driving the awe effect and being able to model behaviors using it, this is the challenge. I think that we can have new ways of creating a long-term change.
Yeah. Well, I have a question about long-term change, but let me tell you a theory I've made up, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. Is so what you're talking about a lot when you look up and you see the cosmos, or you stand on top of a mountain, you see all of a sudden like you're inside a small hole, and then you look outside and you see this whole wonder, and you take in all this beauty, and you have that sense of awe, where you literally go ah, right? I think what I think that is, and this is not I am not a PhD, but this is just my own interpretation on it. Is when you look at a screen, you have a rendering. You see what's on screen. It's called rendering, right? And generally, when you take in too much of an environment, you max out your ability to render something. You match out what your ability to see. And I think when you actually in real life, when you take on so much beauty, your brain you're rendering too much beauty, and your mind goes into a state of awe, which you can't process it, which now forces you to expand your possibilities, because you're like, does not compute, awe. And so I think that sense of awe is a rendering issue, that your brain is trying to recalculate how much beauty it can squeeze into its own capacity at a certain time. And I don't know what your thoughts are around that.
No, I think that it's true in the sense that for the brain is forced to change to as you say, to new rendering, because what we have predicted in advance is not good enough to explain what you are experiencing that specific moment. So I think that is true. A new rendering experience.
Yeah, thank you. I was curious. I don't get to talk to a lot of people about this, so it was interesting. You talked about creating a lasting change. How do you, because in the moment, change in a moment is quick, but then people can flip back. Is there ways to leverage VR for lasting change? Is there ways that you can, because you can create that sense inside virtual reality, but how do you create a sustainable, lasting, transformative change using virtual reality, either as a piece or the whole?
Wow, great question. I think that a long-term change is related to a new rendering, as you said. When you have a long-lasting change, your prediction has to change itself. So the virtual reality has to be so unexpected, so new for you, that your prediction have to be shaped again from scratch. For instance, entering in a new body is an experience that you never experienced before. That is not possible to have outside virtual reality. You can enter in another body. And doing this experience, for instance, for me, was very strange when I entered for the first time in the body of a female. And it was surprising because I had no breasts. I looked down and said, wow, I have 2 breasts now. And and it was totally new for me. And this kind of surprise push you to change, and in some way this change tend to be long lasting. For instance, this approach has been used to reduce stigma against women. So some colleagues put guys who had problem in relationship with women inside the body of a woman, and they experienced much more empathy and understanding and in this new body than before.
Yeah.
And the same, for instance, for people who had problem with black people. Entering in the body of black men was able to produce a long-term change. So I think that the key for obtaining this long-term change is having virtual reality a really surprising experience that your prediction is not able to handle easily.
That's awesome and beautiful. I had this one experience where normally I'm completely against 360 video. 360 video as an environmental thing. I think it's terrible. I think it's an awful experience. The reason being is that generally VR is all about being embodied, right? Where you can do anything, be anything, you can dance around on stuff. And 360, you're basically a ghost with no arms, no legs, and you're on a torso, and you can just do this. And that's all you really get. Versus you can do so much more in a multiplayer, fully interactive environment. But there was this one case that I thought it was fantastic. I was doing a sexual harassment training in 360 video, and I was a girl sitting down having coffee, and this guy walks up and he comes into my space, and where his junk is right in front of me, and I can't go anywhere, and I am trapped. I'm physically trapped in that environment, and I have to look up, and it's so imposing. I'm like, man, if this is what it feels like to be a girl and you're stuck inside like an environment where you can't move, to where that thing that I hated so much, they leveraged it as a tool, because I felt like I just like wanted to lean back. I'm like, get out of my space. And I thought that was an amazing, I have empathy now for women that have to be in a situation like that where they feel trapped. And that definitely expanded my thoughts of possibilities. So you're saying that basically it has to be so intense that you now have that as a part of your predictions. That is now a factor that you can weigh in. And if it's heavy enough in weight, then it can change your ultimate predictions. You just have to design it properly. So when you're designing these types of experiences for behavioral change, what are some of the key elements that you found to have those types of impacts on people? What are the questions you ask? What are the mechanics you consider? What does that look like?
Well, typically you work at two levels. The first one is the perception one. So you try to understand visually what has to be included in the scene, because every piece of the scene have to have a specific meaning for the individual. The best efficacy of virtual reality therapy is when you are able to develop a customized environment. In the past, we try to create the virtual reality experience in which the therapist was able to put specific items inside the environment in order to create meaning, because the external experience is the main source of meaning. So the more you are able to understand what is meaningful for the individual, and if you can put cues of the meaning inside the environment, this is very powerful and can activate the brain of the individual. Now we are also trying to work on the automatic intuitive level. That is a new line of research in which we are working, and it is based on the concept of interoceptive technology. So we know that inside our body, interoception, the sense of the feeling of our internal body, is critical in order to drive emotions. And what we are trying to do is to create the virtual reality of the inside. Up to now, virtual reality has worked for the outside, for our senses, for perception mostly. So the visual channel, the smell, the touch, and so on. What we are trying to do now is trying to modify through technology the internal signals. For instance, we discovered that there is a specific form of...
Oh, we got a little cutout.
Affective touch.
Just for half a beat. Just for half a beat, I lost you because the internet cut out for a second. What you said, you talked about creating introspective technologies, creating the VR on the inside, and then you said, for example, we have, and then you left me hanging.
Sorry. For instance, we have the skin has a specific the skin has a specific cells that are directly connected to the heart and to the insula. So by stimulating this part of the skin on the forehand, you are able to modify the insula and the emotional part. And we are trying to understand what is needed in order to influence the mechanism of the insula. So by using internal or external signals, we are trying to modify the insula, the behavior of the insula, in order to generate emotions internally. So we are working on externally on the meaning and internally on interoceptive signals in order to improve the efficacy of the experience. Because if you are able to modify both the external world and the internal world, we have a very powerful tool. Unfortunately, we are in the very early stage, but we have discovered that pressure, sounds have a strong effect on many internal part of the body, such as the heart, the vagus nerve, the insula, that can be in some way modulated in order to improve the efficacy of meaning inside virtual reality. Well, I don't know if I was clear enough. Sorry.
No, I understand. Well, I don't. Let me see if I understand, and let me reflect back some things, because I don't understand if it's either one of two directions you're talking about.
Yeah.
Either one. So it sounds like you're trying to create introspective technologies, a way to kind of use VR as a visualization tool to kind of map your internal systems. And it sounds like you're using like kinesthetics, the sense of touch, as one element to stimulate what's going on the inside through pressure, through touch, through what are those means. That sounds like one piece of it. But I'm not sure if you're talking about you want to measure it or you want to influence it. So influencing means, the rubbing the skin gives me a sense of connection and releases oxytocin. So now I feel a sense of connection. Or I'm having a biofeedback reading and I'm measuring my HRV, and then I can tell if I'm being triggered. So are you measuring, are you influencing, or are you trying to do a little bit of both?
Now we are trying to influencing. So this is the big challenge, in the sense that the idea is using this technology to modify the internal signals and reaching this. So we can, using virtual reality for modifying the rational meaning that is based on the meaning you give to the experience. Then we use the intuitive channels based on interoception to modify internally the emotion without any meaning, rational meaning attributed to the experience. We have, for instance, used this approach recently to reduce pain. We know that pain is produced by our brain, and reducing the level of pain, chronic pain in particular, is quite difficult. The idea was using interoceptive technology to stimulate a specific part of our brain, like in virtual reality. So the idea is that like virtual reality tries to simulate the external world, we try to simulate, using interoceptive technology, the internal world. We have published also a paper that I can share with the audience to make this concept clear. Unfortunately, it's now almost 10 p.m. for me in Italy, and I'm a little tired. Sorry for that. But
we'll wrap in just a minute. I just want to. So what it sounds like you're doing, and correct me on. So let me give you a crude example. I have a VR headset on. I take a lighter or a heat device and I put it on my hand. But then inside, but then I have an HRV device that measures my heart rate. And so you are influencing through the power of heat touching the skin. You are measuring an unbiased, a direct limbic response through the HRV. And then inside virtual reality, you can modify that by saying, if you're in a snow world, will that create less pain? Or if it looks like an oven, it's creating more heat and more pain. Is that what I understand?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Great work of summarizing, but the concept is right. This one.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. It sounds like the checks and balances where you're literally recreating someone's reality, both the internal, external, physical, all of that, all related together, and you're having this kind of value chains of checks and balances along the way, which it sounds like a daunting task.
Yeah, because the real problem is the modeling of the internal body. But now through neuroscience, we have some guidelines that drives our analysis. This is I shared with you this paper that use this approach for pain. So we try to model pain on the internal side, and we try to understand how to use internal technology, interoceptive technology, to modify it internally. And this can be added to what has been done in the past using virtual reality for reducing pain. So we have two tools, virtual reality for outside, and you have typically distraction that has been used successfully for reducing pain. And then you have this internal modulation based on interoceptive technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that all sounds fantastic. I think that there's one reality I think that you're leaving out of the mix, which I like to say. So you have your internal mental models, right? Your predictive codings, right? You have your external environment, right? Which is you saying the environment assigns meaning to it. The only element that you're missing from that one is our social reality, the ability that we have to basically create and co-create shared experiences, narrative meanings, not based upon what you think, but based upon what I think you think. And that
is of course.
So is it?
This is we are very aware of this. It's true. The social world is a so important part of our life, even now that social media are a daily part of our experience. However, creating very good virtual reality social experience is not easy yet. We tested different technologies that are even promising, but we know that Facebook is working on the metaverse, so I expect new technologies for reaching this goal very soon. I tried the Facebook Horizon system, but it's not a good example of what you are saying. But I think that this social is still a missing part of virtual reality experience. And since the times of Second Life, we have not seen yet a real social experience that is able to be effective, at least for a clinical domain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, and Horizons, Facebook tried to do what they typically do, is copy the best person in the space, steal other features, and then push them out. Instagram with other ones, and they kind of fell flat on their face with the whole Horizon. So I think that thing's going to be shut down quick, fast, and in a hurry, because they just weren't able to execute. And there's some various reasons why that wasn't possible. Is there any other realities that we're missing besides the internal, the external, and the social? Are there realities beyond that you can think of that are influenced by this? I'm not aware of it, but I was curious if there's anything that you had on that one.
I think that the other dimension that we can manipulate is time. That is not is including everyone. So time includes internal, external, social. But biggest challenge is being able to move these three realities over time in the past and the future. So I think that re-experiences mistakes in the past and experiences, future experience through digital technologies can be very powerful tools. We know that the ability of re-experiencing the past and inventing the future is a critical ability of our mind, and digital technology can be very powerful and provide this opportunity to each one if the technology can achieve a big boost in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah. And one last major question, then we can wrap this up. Is do you feel some people say that we have a collective consciousness or a collective unconsciousness that we all tap into, when you drop in the states of flow or you do something else, but they feel like we're linked to a kind of collective consciousness that has like the sum of all of world's information. And this is kind of some thoughts. If you look at like power versus force or other things like that, do you have any beliefs, thoughts, theories? And this is going a bit more into the woo-woo stage of do you think that there is a collective unconsciousness or things that we can tap into that we just don't have access through?
Well, I think that our collective consciousness is based on common predictions. So what is the background of each culture is the type of prediction you can do and you can achieve. In some sense, I think that the predictive coding approach also suggests us that the collective unconscious can be based on common prediction that are shared by the social world. So a culture essentially is based on shared prediction about ourselves and the other people that can drive our behavior. And in this sense, I think that it's true.
Yeah. Okay, it makes sense. It sounds like more in the social reality side. I'm just curious about that one, but that's been fantastic, and this has been wonderful speaking with you. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how they can get a hold of you and more find about your work?
Well, if you want to know more about my work and read some of my paper, you can check my website, giusepperiva.com. So it's easy. And I think that you can find some interesting ideas that probably can drive you through a better future.
Beautiful. Giuseppe, it has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate all the work that you're doing. And thank you for staying up late with me and going deep with me at the same time. So have a blessed and beautiful night over in Milan. And I will see you in another reality.
Thank you, Dylan. It was a pleasure. Ciao to everyone.
Ciao. Take care now. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the other side.